Tutankhamun is one of the pharaohs of the 18th Egyptian family in the history of ancient Egypt, and he was the pharaoh of Egypt from 1334 BC to 1325 BC. Tutankhamun is considered one of the most famous pharaohs for reasons not related to the achievements he made or the wars he won, as is the case with many pharaohs. Rather, for other reasons that are important from a historical point of view, the most prominent of which is the discovery of his entire tomb and treasures without any damage, and the mystery surrounding the circumstances of his death, as many considered the death of Pharaoh at a very young age to be unnatural, especially with traces of fractures in the femur and skull, and the marriage of his minister to his widow after his death and the inauguration of himself as Pharaoh. All these mysterious events, and the heavy use of the legend of the curse of the pharaohs associated with the tomb of Tutankhamun, which was used in films and video games, made Tutankhamun the most famous of the pharaohs for mysteries and questions that remain unanswered. Some considered it one of the oldest assassinations in human history. Tutankhamun died young and was buried in his tomb 62, in the Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun was 9 years old when he became pharaoh of Egypt, and his name in the ancient Egyptian language means the living image of the god Amun, the chief of the ancient Egyptian gods. Tutankhamun lived in a transitional period in the history of ancient Egypt, where he came after Akhenaten, who tried to unite the gods of ancient Egypt in the form of the one god. During his reign, a return to the worship of the multiple gods of ancient Egypt took place. His tomb was discovered in 1922 in the Valley of the Kings by British archaeologist Howard Carter. This discovery caused a widespread media stir in the world. His life. During the rule of Tutankhamun, a revolution began from Tel El Amarna against the movement of the former pharaoh Akhenaten, who moved the capital from Thebes to his new capital, Sister Aten, in Minya, and tried to unite the multiple gods of ancient Egypt, including the god Amun, in the form of the one god Aten. In the year 1331 BC, that is, in the third year of the rule of Tutankhamun, who was 11 years old, and under the influence of the minister, that is, the ban on worshipping the gods was lifted. There is a prevailing belief that the death of Tutankhamun was not due to pathological reasons, but rather it may be the result of an assassination that was orchestrated by Minister Khepri, and there are many evidences cited by believers in this theory, including, for example, the marriage of Minister Khepri to the widow of Tutankhamun, where he found a pharaonic seal bearing the name of Ankhesenamun, the widow of Tutankhamun. There is also a letter sent by Ankhesen, the widow of Tutankhamun, to the king of the Hittites, asking him to send one of his sons for the purpose of marrying her after the death of her husband. The king of the Hittites sent one of his sons to marry the widow of Tutankhamun, but he died before entering the land of Egypt, and there is a belief that he was most likely assassinated by the arrangement of the minister, Khepri, who apparently was planning to seize the throne of Egypt, so he killed King Tutankhamun and killed the son of the king of the Hittites. But these are hypotheses, and there is no conclusive evidence to prove all these theories. It is worth noting that the historical evidence indicates that there were two ministers of Tutankhamun, one of whom was mentioned and the other was named Hormheb, and there are archaeological evidence confirming that after the death of Tutankhamun, the minister took over the reins of government for a short period, to be replaced by the second minister, Hormheb, during whose reign most of the evidence of the reign of Tutankhamun and Minister I, and this confirms for some the conspiracy theory, and the fact that Tutankhamun's death was due to malaria, which was widespread in the south. The reasons for his death. For a long time, the cause of Tutankhamun's death was a controversial issue, and there were many conspiracy theories that favored the idea that he did not die, but was killed in an assassination. On March 8, 2005, as a result of the use of three-dimensional CT scans on the mummy of Tutankhamun, Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass stated that there was no evidence that Tutankhamun had been subjected to an assassination, adding that the hole in his skull did not belong, for the reason that he received a blow to the head, as was previously believed, but this hole was created after death for the purpose of embalming. This fracture may have caused his death. Recent analyses also showed that the roof of the oral cavity of Tutankhamun was incomplete and the height of Tutankhamun was 170 centimeters and the transverse length of his skull was greater than the normal length, which led some to suggest Marfan syndrome as a cause of early death, and this condition is hereditary and transmitted through autosomal genes. Dominant. The final report of the team of Egyptian archaeologists was that the cause of death was blood poisoning as a result of the fracture in the thigh bone that Tutankhamun was subjected to, which led to gangrene, which is the death of cells and tissues and their decomposition as a result of the secretion of enzymes from the dead muscles due to the lack of oxygen reaching them through the blood. Before this report, there were attempts to find out the cause of death by using X-rays on the mummy of Tutankhamun, which took place at the University of Liverpool and the University of Michigan in 1968 and 1978, respectively. The spread of the hypothesis that he had received a blow to the head, which led to bleeding in the brain and then death. In a study published in March 2010, it was indicated that the cause of Tutankhamun's death was his infection with malaria and complications from a broken leg. The study also indicated the presence of some genetic diseases resulting from a genetic defect inherited in the family. The discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun. The so-called Valley of the Kings, located on the west bank of the Nile River near Thebes, for a period of 450 years during the era of the New Kingdom of the history of the ancient Egyptians, which extended from 1539 to 1075 BC, served as a cemetery for the pharaohs of that period, as there is in this rocky valley, which has an area of approximately 20,000 square meters. 27 royal tombs belonging to three families, namely the 18th Egyptian family, the 19th Egyptian family, and the 20th Egyptian family have been discovered to this day. First, Seti I, Ramses II, Amenemses, Seti II and Siptah, who are from the 19th Egyptian family, Setnakti, Ramses III and Ramses IV, Ramesses V and Ramesses IX, who are from the 20th Egyptian family. There are other tombs of unknown pharaohs. Attempts are still underway to identify them. The construction of the tomb of the pharaoh usually began days after the inauguration of pharaoh over Egypt, and the construction usually took decades, and the workers used simple tools such as the axe to dig long grooves and form small rooms in the valley. Mostly due to the blockage of the corridors leading to the tomb of the oldest pharaoh, this lack of organized planning was the main reason that led to the survival of these treasures and not being stolen for thousands of years. The main shrine of Tutankhamun's tomb. On November 4, 1922, when the British archaeologist and specialist in the history of ancient Egypt, Howard Carter, was excavating at the entrance to the tunnel leading to the tomb of Ramesses VI in the Valley of the Kings, he noticed the existence of a large vault and continued careful excavation until he entered the room that includes the tomb of Tutankhamun and was on the walls of the room. The shrine contains wonderful drawings that tell in the form of pictures the story of Tutankhamun's departure to the world of the dead. The scene was very impressive for the world Howard Carter, who was looking at the room through an opening with a candle in his hand, and it is said that his assistant asked him, "Can you see anything?" Carter replied, "Yes, I see wonderful things." On February 16, 1923, Howard Carter, 1874 to 1939, was the first person in more than 3,000 years to set foot on the floor of the room containing the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun. Carter noticed the presence of a wooden box with gold inlaid inscriptions in the middle of the room. When he lifted the box, he noticed that the box was covering a second box decorated with gold inlaid inscriptions. When he lifted the second box, he noticed that the second box was covering a third box inlaid with gold. When the third box was lifted, Carter reached the sarcophagus, which was covered with a thick layer of stone carved in the form of a statue of Tutankhamun, and when he raised this stone cover, Carter reached the main golden coffin, which was in the form of a statue of Tutankhamun, and this golden coffin was covering two other golden coffins in the form of statues of the young pharaoh. Howard found it difficult to lift the third golden shroud that was covering the mummy of Tutankhamun from the mummy, so Carter thought that exposing the shroud to the heat of the blazing summer sun of Egypt would be sufficient to separate the golden shroud from the mummy, but his attempts failed, and he had to finally cut the golden shroud into two halves to reach the mummy, which was wrapped in layers of silk, and after removing the shroud made of cloth, he found the mummy of Tutankhamun with all his adornment, including necklaces, rings, the crown, and sticks, all of pure gold. To remove these artifacts, the excavation team had to separate the skull and the main bones from its joints, and after removing the ornaments, the team reinstalled the structure. The mummy's bones were placed in a wooden coffin. The Mummy Show. In February 2010, the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism decided to allow the mummy of the young pharaonic king, Tutankhamun, to be shown to the public for the first time since it was discovered with its golden shrine in Luxor 85 years ago. The director of the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, Zahi Hawass, said that Egyptian scientists began more than 2 years ago to restore the mummy of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, which was severely damaged after it was removed from its sarcophagus for a short period when it was subjected to axial tomography. He added that the bulk of the mummy's body was crumbled into 18 pieces that looked like stones that were shattered in parts when British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered it for the first time and took it out of its tomb and tried to remove the golden mask that was covering the face of King Tutankhamun and pointed out that the mystery that surrounded Tutankhamun and his golden shrine he aroused the curiosity and enthusiasm of fans of ancient Egyptian studies since Carter revealed the site of the mummy on November 4, 1922, and the treasures of gold and precious stones that were hidden. Scientists had removed the mummy of Tutankhamun from her tomb and placed it on the advanced CT scan table for a quarter of an hour in 2005 in order to obtain a three-dimensional image of a mummy over 3,000 years old. The results of the medical examination ruled out that the young pharaoh had died, but she could not accurately determine the manner of his death, which occurred in the year 1323 BC. The images discovered that King Tutankhamun suffered a fracture in his left thigh, most likely due to an accident, which later led to his contracting a fatal disease that could not be determined. The pictures at the time also provided an unprecedented revelation about the life of the young pharaoh, who was one of the most famous kings of ancient Egypt, including that he was healthy because of his good nutrition, despite his relatively slender build, whose height did not exceed 170 centimeters at his death. And there are strange things that happen to everyone who enters it. For example, the first scientist who discovered it died of poisoning. Some believe that this is because of the food, while others believe that it is because of the curse of the pharaohs. Attempts to find out the mystery of his death. On February 17, 2010, Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities at the time, announced in a press conference in the garden of the Egyptian Museum a set of scientific discoveries that solve many of the mysteries of the end of the 18th dynasty, including the mystery of Tutankhamun's death. An analysis of the DNA of King Tut's mummy showed the results are that the cause of death is due to the malaria parasite, and it is likely that severe complications from the disease led to his death. DNA analysis and a CT scan of the mummy of Tutankhamun revealed that King Akhenaten is the father of King Tut. The results also revealed that genetic and hereditary diseases played a role in the death of Tutankhamun, as he was suffering from a genetic defect inherited in the family, and there were weaknesses and diseases in these mummies, and problems related to the heart and blood vessels. When the researchers conducted a survey of the mummy of Tutankhamun, they discovered that he had many diseases, such as a humpback in his spine, as well as a deformity of the big toe, which led to atrophy in his left foot. Hawass said that the ancient drawings depicted Tutankhamun shooting arrows while sitting in the horse-drawn chariot, and not while standing, which is unusual. In his tomb, we found 100 walking sticks, and at first we thought they represented power and strength, but it turned out to be old crutches he was using. He could barely walk. Hawass also indicated that the computer scan of the mummy in the year 2005 was aimed at verifying that he had been killed, given that previous X-ray images revealed a hole in his skull, adding that it was found that this hole was made during the embalming process, but a fracture was discovered in his skull. The left tibia may have played a role in the death of the young pharaoh. The importance of the treasures of Tutankhamun. The importance of King Tutankhamun's collection is due to many reasons. The first of which is that the treasure of King Tutankhamun is the most complete and unparalleled royal treasure ever found, as it consists of 358 pieces, including the magnificent golden mask and 3 coffins in the form of a human being, one of which is made of pure gold and the other 2 are made of gilded wood. Secondly, that these belongings date back to the 18th dynasty, the most famous and brightest era of the modern state, when the country opened up to the regions of the ancient Near East thanks to military campaigns and commercial relations such as export and import of resources, manufactured products, and the activity of craftsmen and artists. Finally, that this enormous group has remained in Egypt and shows how the royal tomb was prepared and prepared. There are the effects of daily life, such as dolls and toys, then a group of completed furniture, tools and war equipment, and statues of the lords related to the burial of the king and the rituals performed for him, and the famous trumpet of Tutankhamun, made of silver and another of copper, and all of these contents are now in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Fourth, from this treasure or the enormous collection, we learn about a lot of the king's life, his love of hunting, and his relationship with his wife, Tutankhamun, who was believed to be his relative, in addition to knowing his most important works and entourage, and finally the only throne chair that came to us from the